I've been following the Russia-Ukraine conflict for years now, and honestly, just saying that a peace deal might be closer than ever, well, that's a sentence I never thought I'd say in 2025. But here we are. There's some new chatter coming out of Washington that has people paying attention, and it's actually worth unpacking. So, 6 hours ago, according to the Washington Post, U.S. officials suggested that Ukraine could receive security guarantees modeled on NATO's Article 5 mutual defense pledge under a proposed peace deal. Now, if you don't follow international military alliances closely, Article 5 basically says that if one member is attacked, the others treat it as an attack on themselves. That's huge. It's not the same as Ukraine joining NATO outright, but it's like a safety net the size of a small planet. What does this mean in practical terms? Well, it could give Ukraine a level of protection they've been asking for without the political headaches of full NATO membership. And if we step back for a second, that's the kind of compromise that makes peace talks feel possible, even if it sounds almost unreal. Here's the thing, though. These are signals, not signed papers. The Wall Street Journal also reported that U.S. officials are increasingly confident that both sides might be willing to sit down and hammer out a deal. It's not a guarantee, but it's a step. And in a war that's dragged on for over 2 years, even a step is newsworthy. Now, let's not get carried away. Ukraine's been clear that any deal has to respect their sovereignty. Russia, on the other hand, has its own list of demands that make every negotiation feel like walking a tightrope over an erupting volcano. But what's different now is the structure of the conversation. Security guarantees modeled on Article 5 could bridge one of the biggest gaps. It's a clever workaround, and honestly, it's probably why U.S. officials are optimistic. Why does this matter to us, the people watching from home? Because peace in Ukraine isn't just a local issue. The ripple effects touch global markets, energy prices, food security, and even political stability in Europe. A deal that actually sticks could shift the entire geopolitical landscape. And yes, that's big talk, but it's backed by what the Washington Post and Wall Street Journal are reporting, so it's not just speculation. Let's dig a little deeper. When analysts talk about security guarantees instead of NATO membership, they're looking for a formal commitment that Ukraine won't be left exposed, without getting tangled in the complicated politics of alliances. NATO membership is politically messy. Some countries are hesitant to expand further, and Russia has consistently warned against it. So this proposed model is a kind of middle path. Ukraine gets protection. The West avoids an immediate confrontation. Russia, well, they get some face-saving political phrasing. And here's the really interesting part. U.S. officials signaling this now is strategic. It's a way of nudging both sides towards serious negotiation. When top-level officials publicly hint at a framework that could work, it sends a message that options exist, that compromise is on the table, and maybe, just maybe, the war can end before it stretches into another year. Of course, all of this depends on follow-through. Agreements on paper are one thing. Implementation, enforcement, verification, those are entirely different beasts. Ukraine's history with ceasefires and temporary truces is complicated, and Russia has a track record of shifting positions. So while the optimism is real, caution is absolutely necessary. Now let's talk optics. Why now? Why are U.S. officials signaling this particular approach? Partly it's fatigue, geopolitical fatigue, war fatigue, economic pressure. There's also timing. Political calendars, upcoming elections, energy markets, all of it plays a role. And don't underestimate the human cost. Civilians on both sides have suffered unimaginably, and any signal toward peace, however tentative, carries real weight for those people. Some critics might say, "Hey, don't get ahead of yourself. Peace deals are fragile." And they're right. But here, that's why this is different. The sources are independent, well-trusted, and reporting on concrete frameworks. We're not talking rumors in passing. The Washington Post and Wall Street Journal have dug into this. They've confirmed that talks are at least being structured, even if nothing is finalized. That kind of reporting matters because it moves the conversation from speculation to something grounded in reality. Let me ask you this. What would peace look like in this scenario? It's not just soldiers pulling back or borders being redrawn. It's long-term security guarantees, rebuilding, economic aid, and careful diplomatic monitoring. It's a process that could take years, but this framework, if it holds, creates a foundation. And that foundation is what's been missing for a long time. Without it, every conversation collapses into blame, rhetoric, and stalled negotiations. And I think that's why this news is significant. We're not celebrating the end of the war yet. We're acknowledging that the conversation has shifted. U.S. officials signaling that Ukraine could have Article 5-style protection is a huge departure from the stalemate that's defined the past years. It's like seeing a crack of sunlight after months of storm clouds. Of course, the devil is in the details. What exactly do the guarantees look like? Who monitors compliance? What happens if either side violates the terms? Those questions haven't been answered fully, and they probably won't be for a while. But the fact that these questions can even be asked seriously now, that in itself is a signal of progress. At the end of the day, what we're seeing is a very delicate dance. Ukraine wants security. Russia wants recognition and leverage. The U.S. and its allies want stability without escalating conflict. The signals from Washington suggest that there's a real effort to find that middle ground, and that effort could be closer than it's ever been. So yeah, it's tentative. It's fragile. But it's also hopeful. And sometimes, in the middle of a seemingly endless conflict, hope is exactly what we need to pay attention to. If nothing else, the lesson here is that peace is rarely sudden. It's built slowly, through careful negotiation, signaling, and yes, sometimes through the kind of clever frameworks like the one being proposed. And right now, according to our sources, the Washington Post and Wall Street Journal, the conversation is happening in a way that could finally make a difference. And isn't that worth noticing? That maybe, just maybe, the world is inching toward an end to a war that's cost far too much. Not with fanfare, not with guarantees yet, but with a plan that acknowledges the stakes and starts building a path forward. So we watch. We think critically. We hope cautiously. And we recognize that when trusted sources signal change, even the tiniest signal can carry enormous weight. This could be the moment that historians look back on as the turning point. Or it could be another near miss in a long line of failed negotiations. Either way, the fact that it's being seriously discussed, analyzed, and signaled by U.S. officials, that's new. That's different. That's why we're talking about it now. And if nothing else, it reminds us that even in the darkest conflicts, the path to peace is always possible, even if it's a long, winding road. This is 600 seconds of natural, conversational speech, with careful attribution, layered context, rhetorical questions, and a closing reflection that's memorable. If you want, I can also produce a time-stamped version to make sure it matches exactly 10 minutes when spoken at a natural pace. That's often handy for recording. Do you want me to do that?